All right. Chapter 26. Nerissa's just kind of gone off her rocker. She sat on the floor, rocking back and forth, laughing. The very picture of madness. Man, somebody needs to help this girl, thought Gregor. Vicus came up and crouched beside her on the floor. Nerissa, perhaps you should rest longer. Are you feeling ill? Oh, no, I am well. We are all well, giggled Nerissa. The warrior has fulfilled the prophecy. No, Nerissa, he did not succeed in killing the Bane, Vicus said gently. Vicus, said Nerissa, the baby lives, so lives the warrior's heart. The Gnars do not have their key to power. Vicus looked like a lightning bolt had hit him. He plunked down on the floor next to her. This is what Sandwich meant, he said. We never considered it. What? Said Gregor. He wasn't sure what was going on. The baby in the prophecy was never your sister, Gregor. It was the Bane, said Vicus. The Bane? Why would it kill my heart if the Bane died, said Gregor. Why did you not drain its light, asked Vicus. Because it's a baby. It's just wrong, said Gregor. It's the most evil thing I mean, if you can kill a baby, what can't you do? So says your heart, so says your most essential part, said Nerissa. Gregor took a few steps back and sat on the cube. Nerissa's meaning was slowly dawning on him. Die the baby, die his heart, die his most essential part. His most essential part was the part that had spared the Bane. If he had killed it, it would never have been the same. He would have lost himself forever. You know, Vicus said to Nerissa, as if they were the only two in the room, I'm continually amazed by how badly we interpret one of Sandwich's prophecies. Then the moment it is understood. The whole thing is as clear as water, agreed Nerissa. Vicus quoted a section from the prophecy. What could turn the warrior weak? What do burning Gnars seek? Just a barely speaking up, who holds the land of under up. The Gnars have always sought the Bane, said Vicus, who is just a barely speaking pup. Sandwich even went so far as to use the word pup, the Gnars' own word for baby, said Nerissa. And the Bane holds the land of under up, nodded Vicus. Because if Gregor had killed it, continued Nerissa, total war, said Vicus. His death would have been enough to rally them. Taking that pup to Ripred was a stroke of genius, Gregor. Oh, they will not know how to parry that move. Queen Nerissa, are we to continue the trial? Asked the head judge. Nerissa looked up as if she was surprised at her surroundings. Trial? For the warrior? Of course there will be no trial. He has saved the Underland. She got to her feet, using Vicus for support, and saw the other defendants staring at her. She gave them a small smile, but directed her next line to Ares. And all who helped him are held in our highest regard. Ares ducked his head. Maybe it was about, or maybe he couldn't look at her. Will you dine with me, you four? You look half-starved, said Nerissa. It was kind of ironic coming from her, but a welcome invitation. Somewhat dazed by the recent turn of events, Gregor, Ares, Howard, and Andromeda strangled out of the courtroom after Nerissa. She led them to a small private dining room. The table could seat no more than 6. In one corner, water trickled in a fountain. Old tapestries hung on the walls. It's nice in here, said Gregor. Yes, said Nerissa. This is where I often take my meals. They all took seats. People brought in platters of elegant food, large fish stuffed with grain and herbs, tiny vegetables arranged in geometric patterns, streaming braided bread studded with fruit, paper-thin piles of roast beef, and Ripred's favorite, the shrimp in cream sauce. Do not suppose I always dine this way, said Nerissa. This food was prepared for the coronation. Please begin. Gregor lifted his bread, dipped it in the cream sauce, and took a bite. For a while they all concentrated on food, except Nerissa, who seemed to be mostly rearranging hers. I'm afraid I'm poor conversationalist, said Nerissa, even at my best, and at present, grief for my cousin's fate has robbed me of what little I might venture to say. It's the same for us all, Howard said sadly. Yes, no one here has been spared, said Nerissa. It was true, the journey to the labyrinth had given them all a reason for grief. Gregor was glad that Nerissa acknowledged it, and that they could continue in silence. After days of no food, Gregor's stomach was soon heavy with the rich dishes. Nerissa then sent the 4 of them down to the hospital. Andromeda and Howard hadn't received medical care or been allowed to bathe either. "When did you guys get back?" asked Gregor. "About 12 hours before you arrived." Andromeda was astonishing. She barely rested at all. "When we landed, they took Merith to the hospital and locked us up. But I know one of the guards. She whispered word of Merith's recovery to us." At the hospital, all 4 of them were immediately sent to bathe. Gregor realized he must be knocking people over with the rotten egg smell. After several days, he didn't much notice it anymore. He sank into a tub and felt all his injuries abject. The squid sucker marks on his arm, the aching ribs, the bump on his head from Ripred, the various cuts and bruises from the stoning, the rope burns, and around his wrist. Wincing, he scrubbed himself down. It was lucky that the bathwater was continually carried away by the current. It would have been the color of mud by the time he was through. The doctors treated his wounds. He spoke only when they asked him a direct question about an injury. When he finished, the others were waiting for him. "I suppose we should all get some rest," said Howard. "Is that safe?" asked Gregor. No one answered. Their status in Regalia was foggy. Nerissa had cleared them, but Gregor had a feeling plenty of people still thought they were guilty. "I have a large chamber that would accommodate us. It is reserved for my family." They all followed Howard back to his room. The bats dropped off to sleep almost instantly. Howard tossed and turned a while, but then Gregor could hear his breathing slow down and become rhythmic. He lay in bed wishing sleep could carry him away, but it wouldn't come. What would happen now? He guessed he would be allowed to go home, probably pretty soon. Then there would be his family to face and life without Boots. It still wasn't quite real. It would be when he was back in the apartment, looking at her bed, her toys, her cardboard box of books. Gregor thought of her clothes sitting in the museum. He didn't want to leave them here for people to poke through. He grabbed a torch off the wall and left Howard's room. A few guards saw him along the way, but no one tried to stop him. He found the museum on his own. There, by the door, was the little pile of Boots' clothes. He pressed her shirt against his nose and could smell the sweet combination of shampoo and peanut butter and baby that was his sister. For the first time, his eyes welled up with tears. "Gregor," said a voice behind him. He stuffed the shirt in the pack and wiped his eyes as Vicus came to the museum. "Hey, Vicus," he said. "What's up?" "The council has just adjourned what I believe to be the first of many meetings addressing the prophecy of Bane. But until it is decided, Nerissa's word stands, and that could change. I think it's best if you leave as soon as possible." "Fine by me," said Gregor. "What about the others?" "I believe charges will not be reinstated against Andromeda and Howard." "Your testimony of their innocence is quite convincing," said Vicus. "And Ares?" said Gregor. Vicus sighed. "He is a greater risk, but if he is to be charged again, I will get word to him so that he may flee. He can at least escape execution." Gregor nodded. "Is there anything you would like to take back with you?" Vicus asked. "I don't want anything but our stuff," said Gregor. Let's see. Vicus tried to question him in detail, but he couldn't take it. "You know, maybe I'll take that clock," he said, pointing to the cuckoo clock he'd seen when he was collecting batteries. He'd said it to change the subject, but he knew someone who might like it. "I will have it wrapped for you," said Vicus. "Great, so I guess I'll see if Ares is up for flying yet. And like you said, get out of here," said Gregor. He scooped up his clothes and left the museum. Vicus could learn a thing or two from Nerissa. Sometimes people just didn't want to talk. He got all turned around on his way back to Howard's room. The route was unfamiliar, and the tears that had started back in the museum were streaming down his cheeks. Well, maybe it was better to break down here and than in front of his parents. He turned left and then right and then backtracked. Where was he? Where was his sister? She had just been here. He had her close. He could feel her in his arms. Boots! He gave up and pressed his forehead into a stone wall, sobbing as he let the pain in. Images of her swarmed back into his mind. Boots on the sled. Boots showing him how she could hop on one foot. Boots' eyes upside down, their foreheads pressed together. 2 rows. Tiny, tiny toes. Boots. 10. Wiggle my nose. Phew! He could even hear her voice trying to do that silly bath rhyme Howard had coaxed out of her with her tears. Wiggle nose. 9, 10 toes. She couldn't get it right. The words were too complicated. Give them bath so 10 toes goes? And then she gave a sneeze. Gregor looked up. That didn't make sense. He heard a second sneeze. not in his head, in the palace. He started to run. 2 rows, tiny, tiny toes. Either he was completely losing it, boots, 10, wiggle my nose, phew! Or the sound was real. He flew down the halls, crashing into walls and a couple of guards who called for him to halt. He didn't. Wiggle nose, 9, 10 toes. Gregor ran into the room just in time for the last line. Give them bath so 10 toes goes. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by 6 big cockroaches, rubbing her toes with both hands to show how she washed them. He stumbled across the room and grabbed her up in his arms and held on tight as a happy voice squealed in his ear. Hi, you! Yay, she's not dead! Best part of the book ever.